Pickled beetroot is one of my absolute favourites, and it takes quite simple ingredients, to be honest, so I'll just run you through them now, but I will put them in the description below. So I'm using 750 millilitres of white wine vinegar, 120 grams of soft brown sugar, 4 to 5 teaspoons of coarse crystal sea salt, and then a mixture of pickling spices. Now this includes 1 tablespoon of black peppercorns, 1 tablespoon of coriander seeds, 1 tablespoon of mustard seeds, a couple of cloves and some chilli flakes, as well as 2 bay leaves. And also, of course, my beetroot. I'm using 1.3 kilograms, and that's after they've been trimmed and washed. To start, you're going to want to clean up and trim up your beetroots. Now these are freshly harvested from my allotment, so they're still covered in a bit of mud, and the leaves, although they've gone all droopy, I'm not going to be using them. You can eat them, but mine have gone a bit wilted for keeping. So all I'm doing is trimming off the tops, leaving about an inch stem attached to the beetroot. And that's actually really important, because if you want to preserve that gorgeous deep crimson colour of your beetroot, you don't want to cut away too much of the stem, otherwise it essentially bleeds through the top. And I'm just putting this into my kitchen sink full of nice hot water, and then I'm just going to take my little scrubby carrot to clean these up and get rid of any dried on dirt, just to make sure they're nice and clean before we proceed to the next step, which will be roasting them in the oven. You do want to be quite careful when you're handling the beetroots. You don't want to break the skin. The less damage you cause, then the less likely they are to bleed all that colour. And I mean, what a gorgeous colour, look at those. To cook the beetroot, I'll be roasting them in the oven, which I've already preheated to gas mark 6, that's 200 degrees C or 180 fan. And I'm going to be wrapping up the beetroot in some tin foil. And what this does is it speeds up the cooking process in the oven, and essentially it kind of steams them at the same time as roasting them. And believe me, this process of roasting can take quite a while. So I'm filling a bowl with some olive oil and just coating each beetroot with a bit of oil to help them cook through, and sprinkling on a little bit of that sea salt. You then want to place it in the middle of a piece of tin foil, and then wrapping it up individually to make a nice little pocket with all of the edges nicely sealed, so that there's no air going to escape, because you want the steam to stay inside to help cook your beetroot. You can then place that onto your oven tray, ready to go into the oven, and continue to wrap each of your beetroots in individual sheets of tin foil. Now, if you do have quite a few smaller ones, I do like to put them together. Just make sure that all those edges are nicely sealed before you pop them on the tray. And then when they're all wrapped up, they're ready to go into the oven for what could take half an hour up to an hour and a quarter. So whilst the beetroot's cooking, I will start my pickling mixture. So I'm going to be putting in all of the spices to start with into a dry pan. There's absolutely no oil in here whatsoever. And I'm going to be toasting off those spices. So you want to be able to smell all of that spicy aroma, that fragrant smell filling the air, before you then add the vinegar and also the sugar as well. Now we don't want to be bringing this to a boil. It's just going to be simmering away very gently until we're ready to jar our beetroot. From time to time, you're going to want to check on the progress of your beetroots. And to do this, you want to take a skewer or something nice and sharp, poke it into the side of the beetroot at the thickest point, and if it doesn't go all the way to the middle, it's going to need a bit longer. And these guys can take quite a while, especially if you've got some really big ones. Just be careful when you open those little pockets, because they do let out quite a bit of steam. Whilst the beetroots are in the oven, and after they've been cooking for at least 20-25 minutes, I'm going to start to prepare my jars and get them sterilised. Now, I purposely choose jars that are dishwasher safe, because it means they can handle high temperatures. And you should always make sure you take a look at this information before you put them in the oven or do anything like that. So my jars, to sterilise them, I'm putting them into my sink full of hot soapy water, giving them a really good thorough wash, and then after I've given them a clean, they go onto a baking sheet, And these need to go into the oven for no longer than 20 minutes. So you want to hold off from doing this until you think you're about to jar your beetroot. When the beetroots are fully cooked, it's time to peel them. So the jars are still in the oven, keeping warm, and my pan is still on the hob, keeping the pickling vinegar also quite warm. So one of the slowest processes is actually clearing off the skin from the beetroot, and it can be a bit tedious and a bit time consuming, but as long as you've cooked your beetroot right through, they should have this sort of blistered, charred effect on one side, and that makes it really easy to peel these off, and it should come away quite easily, as I say, as long as they are fully cooked. I'm then going to just top and tail them, removing the root and the leftover bits of those stems, and we've got a nice clean beetroot that's almost ready for jarring. So just continue to, take away all of those skins. Once all the beetroot have been peeled, it's time to get them sliced, or you may want to grate yours. This bit is entirely up to you. I like a nice thick chunk of beetroot on like a cracker with loads of cheese. You might prefer yours cubed, you might like it grated so you can spread it onto something. You might want to keep it in really thick, like quartered chunks. It's up to you. Cut it how you want it. But honestly, look at that colour. I think this is the Bolt Hardy beetroot, or the Moulin Rouge. Is such a gorgeous deep crimson colour. Love it. Then when they've all been sliced, it's finally time to start jarring them. Now this process is very easy, but it's very important that we have hot vinegar, not boiling, not cold, not warm, but hot. And also we need hot jars. Now I've taken this whole tray of jars out, but actually it's better really to take one jar out of the oven as you need it so that it stays hot. And that's all to do with the process of the vacuum seal. If you want your jars to seal so that they can store and be kept for a long, long time, then you need to have hot jars and hot ingredients going inside them. Again, make sure you read the small print on your jars, and make sure that you're not going to be heating them up too much, because not all jars are made the same. So be careful when you take it out the oven. Obviously it's going to be hot. I also put my lids in the oven and my little funnel, which is really, really helpful, because you don't want to get the rim of your jar dirty, because then you might not have a proper seal, and also it might have bacteria and then start nastiness. Right, so I'm putting in a bit of the vinegar at the bottom. I'm not filtering off or straining off any of those peppercorns or anything like that, because I think it adds a lot more flavour over time. You could do if you wanted, but I just like the effect of leaving them in. I have thoroughly washed my hands, by the way. They are clean. And also, if you're doing this, you probably should wear gloves or use tongs, because beetroot, as you probably know, stains your fingers. And I actually did this on Halloween, so it did give me a rather fetch Halloween outfit when I came away with bright red hands for the next day or so. So yeah, I'm using my funnel just to help me push them down the sides, and then use a fork to press it down, because you want to fit as much as you can here. Really pack them in and release any air bubbles down the sides. And then I've got room for just a couple more, and then finishing it off with some more vinegar. And you want that vinegar to come up to the bottom of the neck of the jar, just after it goes in there where it tapers. So we've got about 1 centimetre airspace right at the top. I then use some damp kitchen towel to clean the rim, make sure it's nice and clean, and then give it a tighten. Now, because I'm using hot ingredients with hot jars, as those temperatures begin to cool, that is what seals the jar and creates that little vacuum space, which is why I'm not going to be putting these into a water bath. And I know that that kind of freaks a few people out, but it's perfectly safe. Then when you've sealed the last jar, it's time to set them aside and write some labels. Obviously you want to remember what's in them in a few weeks' time. And also do put the date on, because it's very helpful, especially if, like me, you've got cupboards full of jarred things. And this is where you can get really creative, and if you're going to be making Christmas hampers or giving any away as gifts, you can, really set it off with a nice bit of ribbon or a little tag, make it your own. But I do want to stress that this should not be eaten for at least a couple of weeks, I'd say a month, because you really want the flavour of that vinegar and the sugar to balance out. And if you eat it straight away, it's usually quite sharp and it's not really reflective of the final result. But I'm just doing it here to demonstrate. I do have a nice big cracker with some cheese, and there's just nothing better than enjoying your own homegrown produce. Oh, now I'm going to turn up the volume for this bit, because what I want you to listen for is that absolute important pop. When you open your jars, this is what you want to hear to know that it's got a really good seal, that it's got a safe environment inside, and that you did it correctly. If it doesn't have a pop, then it may not be sealed, and you just want to double check that you've got no bacteria, no mold, or nothing growing on the surface when you open your jar. And then once you open your jar, you can store it in the fridge and use it within 6 weeks or so. But when it's unopened, it should easily store for about 6 months or more, but I would recommend that you do eat it before that 6 months is up for the best flavour. And believe me, it is going to taste amazing. Enjoy! I hope you find this recipe useful, and maybe give pickling a go if you haven't already tried it.